Avoidance.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at the Damage Report. Today is a Tuesday, and while the news is as tragic as you would expect on any random day chosen in American recent political history, what is exciting is our guest, because joining us for the first time, not overall, but as a co-host, Amanda Nguyen, civil rights activist, joins us on the show. Amanda, how's it going?
Going, but I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is going. So I'm very excited to have you here. You appeared on the show just a couple of weeks ago talking about a subject that we're going to be talking about on the show, actually. But for people who might not be familiar with you from that, can you tell the audience a little bit about your work?
Yeah, totally. I'm a civil rights activist. I run an organization called RISE. We accelerate civil rights movements. Essentially, we help train community organizers who work on a whole host of issues. Sexual violence is a large part of our work, and recently, anti-Asian hate crimes.
Exactly, and obviously incredibly timely there. Also, I learned recently in my research, nominated for a Nobel Prize, correct?
Yes, that's right.
See, if that was true of me, it would be in my lower third on the screen. It would, in place of my Twitter, it would just be once nominated for, but you're very humble about that. So appreciate that and you taking the time out. I'm sure you must be very busy.
Excited to be here.
So everyone, thank you for being here, regardless of what platform you're on. Please hit the like button and share the stream so that people know we're live. And we've got a lot that we're gonna be talking about. 2 different mass shootings. We're gonna be getting into that. Sidney Powell's recent legal defense, how the rich avoid taxes. There's a lot of material we're gonna be covering. But as we go through it, if you have questions or comments or concerns, you can feel free to leave us comments or super chats, tweets, anything like that. And we will be responding to those as we go along. So thank you in advance for that. And with that, why don't we jump into our first topic? Yesterday, the United States saw yet another mass shooting with 10 people, including a police officer, being killed on Monday when a gunman opened fire in a supermarket in the Colorado College city of Boulder, in one of several mass shootings in the US over the last week. I believe it's 7 over 7 days, assuming that you have a fairly restrictive definition of what a mass shooting is. We have to in the United States to make the term have any meaning whatsoever because gun violence is so pervasive. Now, the situation is, of course, developing fast. The suspect is in custody, but authorities have not shared any information on his identity, because of course it's a him, the type of weapon used or any possible motive. Although one senior law enforcement source told CNN the weapon used in the shooting was an AR-15 style rifle. Now we don't know that for sure, but it's a mass shooting, so there's a pretty good shot. We have heard that the suspect is a 21-year-old that lived in a suburb near that area, although I don't know if that's considered 100% confirmed at this point. And so we will be finding out more about the identities of those who were killed, regrettably, in this tragic shooting. But we should also understand, as we'll get into throughout the course of the hour, that this exists in the context that the massacre at the King Super store comes less than a week after shootings at 3 spas in the Atlantic area left 8 people dead. And that is 7 shootings in which at least 4 people were injured or killed. And we do this thing, Amanda, where we have to be very selective in terms of which acts of horrendous mass violence actually merit national attention, because the news would just be those if we paid equal attention to all of them. But anyway, what did you think about this most recent tragic event?
Well said, my gosh. I mean, I feel like there could be right now a script that you could just like some AI could just print it out, which is like, this is what the media is gonna say. This is what our politicians are gonna say. This is like, and oh man, have you seen those Onion articles? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, where the headline is the same exact script. And I
believe it's only nation where this happens can't tell how it happened again, or something like that. Yeah.
That's exactly that headline. My God, I obviously wasn't even done processing the last mass shooting, and I know we're gonna go into it later, but I woke up and I was like, I don't even know if it's desensitization at this point, right? Like, I'm just so heartbroken. And how did you feel? I feel like I'm looping in the same loop, which is like, okay, let's look at the news. Oh my God, let's learn about the victims. Let's learn about this. What are we gonna do about it? It's the same conversation. So how did you feel?
I mean, obviously a horrendous tragedy, although I'm not gonna lie to the audience. I am and have been for so long so desensitized, obviously. And in the exact way that you so rightly point out, not just about the event, which it's horrible enough that the event happened. It's horrible enough that one could become desensitized to it. But it almost feels like, and we talk about this a lot, and we're gonna demonstrate it on the show today. It almost feels like a weird form of being in the Matrix and seeing the code. You can see every branching path of how every single organization and individual is going to respond to this, myself included. I know exactly what we're gonna say. We're gonna acknowledge in real time that it's pointless, that it's futile, that we've been through this so many times, but we're going to have to do it because I don't know any other way to respond. So anyway, look, we're gonna say that it's horrendous. We're going to have a motivation, by the way, and motivations don't often, I think, get discussed enough. Whatever I say, whatever you say, I can only speak for myself, but I assume the motivation is, wouldn't it be nice to have fewer mass shootings in the future? But I can guarantee that there are many people who greet the news of another mass shooting, and that is not the thing that's lurking in the back of their mind, regardless of how they responded. In a tweet recently, I broke down some of the ways that right wingers often respond. Sometimes they just duck their head down and don't say anything. Sometimes they offer thoughts and prayers. Sometimes they just come and defend the guns. But the goal of all of those is unified. It is not stopping mass shootings in the future. That is not the thing that they're worried about. They're worried about gun control. And it's sort of an irrational fear anyway, because we live in America. They're never gonna pass any gun control. But that is the fear. That's what they're worried about. And we're gonna demonstrate that in a minute, but I wanted to give you another opportunity to jump in.
No, I think so much about the rhetoric that plays, especially for people who feel so strongly about it, isn't the actual policy, it's their identity. And so, how can we actually say, hey, these are the facts. That's why the facts don't matter for so many people. And I don't know if you have a lot of international friends, but every single time this happens, I hear from my international friends and they're like, what is going on? And so have that perspective a little bit and be able to like think outside of a very American framework for a second, has helped me in some way process through this and kind of get myself outside of that matrix. But yeah, we're still working through it. And I know everyone is hurting so badly. I really, really hope that one day we can sit down and have a conversation with people to move forward.
Yeah, and I don't want to go off on too many tangents because there's so much that we have to talk about, but I just get so frustrated, like seemingly common sense things that one might say. And again, I don't know some of the details of this. We don't know for sure exactly what weapon they had, but I do know that it doesn't matter for some people. If the dude filmed himself immediately beforehand saying, I'm doing this because I believe that more people need to die, and isn't it great that we have guns? And it's so awesome that I was able to get an AR-15. I'm gonna kill so many more people with that. If that came out, it wouldn't change a single mind. So when I say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we're gonna live in a country where frequently people, generally younger white males, decide that they want to shoot as many people as possible, shouldn't we make that tough? Shouldn't we make it so that they have to resort to weapons that aren't really good at killing lots of people? And so I'll tweet something like that, which seems sort of like a benign common sense thing to say. And someone will respond with, if they want the weapon, they'll get the weapon. Okay, but let's actually follow that logic. So the idea is there's no point in banning an AR-15 because you'll just get one if you want one. Try that in practice, how easy it is. But let's say, okay, an AR-15, okay, but what about something better? Let's say I want an M51 crew, like belt-fed machine gun. That's even better at killing a lot of people. Well, by your logic, I can just get one, right? I'll just cruise down to Walmart or something. I want a tank, I want an RPG, I want a flamethrower. Can I just get these things? Well, thanks to Elon Musk, I can get a flamethrower. But aside from that, can I just get these things? No, because it's inconvenient, and it should be. At the very least, even if somehow these weirdo young white supremacists were capable of managing the black market of illegal weapons, let's make it take a while, because then at least we might be able to catch them. But there's no point in having this conversation because nobody that says they're just gonna get it is actually thinking about that. What they're thinking is, I wanna be able to get it. I wanna keep the ones I have, I wanna get more eventually. And so it's so every part of this, Amanda, is so frustrating. I apologize. This is literally the first thing you come on the show to talk about.
But so many people relate to you and like speak it, because people, I mean, we all feel really isolated right now, right? We're at home, movement restrictions, whatever. So yeah, please say it, because the rest of the country can live vicariously through us right now.
They can. Okay, well, let's briefly go through some frustrating stuff. How are some right wingers responding to the shooting? Well, the NRA, which traditionally they just stop tweeting for about 3 days after a mass shooting, which means that they don't actually get to tweet very much because this is America. Instead, they decided to tweet this yesterday. And I swear to God, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So credit to them for actually including the militia part, which most people who spout off about the Second Amendment pretend doesn't exist there. But then they lose all of that credit and way more because they just tweeted out the Second Amendment after a dude who probably loves the Second Amendment went and shot a bunch of people. That's pretty horrendous, Amanda. I guess they don't have to pretend to care about human life anymore.
Yeah, we're beyond that. That's so clear from them. Mm-hmm. Why do we even have these like masks on? It really is about like, this is me, I want control, versus this is you and you want control. And we're just talking past each other. So at this point, we're gonna call it for what it is. This is, people being okay with mass murder. That's what it is.
It is, and sometimes there's a more cowardly version of what the NRA just did. So Jamel Hill, she put this quote up from the Colorado State Shooting Association that says, quote, "There will be a time for the debate on gun laws. There will be a time for the discussion on motives. There will be a time for a conversation on how this could have been prevented. But today is not the time." And she correctly points out it never is. So this is the like go-to tactic of the person who doesn't want change. Well, at some point, not now. Okay, well, that's fair. You're right. It did just happen. So not now. How about next Thursday around 2ish? I'm free. Colorado Shooting Association. You want to talk then? It'll have been a nice buffer. Now, understand that, of course, there will be like 10 more mass shootings by then. But at some point, we have to do it. You're implying that there will be a time. So I think Thursday 2ish is a great time. Pacific, obviously, your Colorado will adapt the time based on that. But no, there's no time. There's no time, like, when are we supposed to talk about getting rid of the Electoral College? Not near elections, certainly. Yep. Might as well wait until nobody talks about it or cares about it anymore. It's just, it's also by the numbers, and it feels like a play. And so we have a part to fill in this play. So I'm going to point out to people, most of whom already know this, that the US has a couple of massive problems that almost certainly lead to these problems. So for instance, did you know that the US has the highest number of civilian firearms per 100 residents? Of course you do, but I'm gonna remind you, we've got over 120 guns for every 100 residents, making the war-torn country of Yemen look like they just can't scrounge together a couple of ARs. So we've got a lot of that. Meaning that though we have less than 5% of the world's population, we have 45% of all the world's privately held firearms. And totally unrelated, we have by far the most homicides by firearm per 1 million people. You can take a look at this chart. We have 6 times what they have in Canada, 16 times what they have in Germany, 29 times what they have in Australia. And that is a place that is littered with animals that will kill you at the blink of an eye. And yet we're the ones who have a lot of guns that end up shooting each other. Even though, and this is, I think, the most important thing to point out, it is not that we have a lot of guns and a lot of people die from guns because against all reason, we're really crime ridden. Take a look at this. We don't have comparable rates of violent crime to places considering the level of killings that we have. There are lots of places that are far less safe on average where they don't manage to kill a lot of people all the time with guns because they don't all have access, easy, quick, unrestricted access to guns. You combine all of these things, and what do you think you would get? You'll get something like modern day America, honestly. Any thoughts, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, what you said earlier about that age-old tactic of saying it's not the right time, it's not that I've heard that in so many different derivatives for literally every single type of change that my activists and I try to do. It's like, oh, well, Not today, maybe at a more appropriate time, And there's never a more convenient season for change. I think that's Martin Luther King. And if you want change, then do it now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, people who say that are protecting the status quo. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they are doing that because they genuinely are afraid of the power that people have. I think a huge part in status quo resetting the balance or keeping the balance is gaslighting people to forget their own power. So like, hey, just chill for a second, just delay it for a little bit. And they do that because it's not only that they're afraid of the actual policy change, but they're afraid of what it means for their own power, because power does not give up power, right? And so yeah, just remember that when you're demanding change. It's always a fine line when you're trying to straddle, like, okay, diplomacy versus, you want to be able to create traction, right? So you have to get people to the table, but at some point you're just gonna have to remember that they have their own constituents in their mind. They're serving their own people. Their interests are not the same as yours, even though they're trying to say that it is.
Yeah, power's not gonna give itself up, and money isn't either. And whether it's the NRA getting money from the gun manufacturers, or Republican and some Democratic elected officials getting money from the NRA and from the gun manufacturers, they're not gonna give that up willingly. And then let a little thing like tons of dead American civilians get in the way of this amazing grift that they've got set up. But in the same way that Amanda was talking about one of these misconceptions we often heard said, I want to respond to another one. And this is sent in by a super chat from Thorin. And Thorin, love you. Thank you for the super chat. As I'm gonna demonstrate, couldn't disagree with you more. He says, it's not the guns, it's the mental health crisis we have. A person who wants to commit mass murder will find a way to do it. So Thorin is right. We do have a mental health crisis. It's a big problem. Aside from that though, I don't agree with Thorin, because sure, a person who wants to kill people can kill people with stuff other than guns. There are places where there have been mass stabbings and things like that. That does happen, but there's a reason that people here use guns. And there's a reason they use the guns that they do generally. It's because they're much better at killing people. I mean, this is sort of a morbid thought, but if you were to go up to someone hunkered down behind a Walmart, shelf while a mass shooter is stalking through, and you were to ask him, hey, if you could, would you want to swap his gun out for a knife? I don't think anyone would be like, what's the difference? It's all the same. It's not all the same. They pick the gun because the gun is the best way to do it. Can I kill someone with a baseball bat? Yes. Can I kill 15 people in 3 minutes with a baseball bat? Probably not. And so I would prefer to have them try to use a knife or a baseball bat. I don't want any of that violence, but if it's gonna happen, I want them to be with the worst guns possible, the worst weapons possible. And so thank you for your super chat, but I just don't agree. It's not just one problem, you're right. It's a combination of multiple ones, and so someone's saying if you took the knives away, they'd use sporks. And how many people do you think you're gonna kill with a spork? Seriously, like jokes aside, I don't know if you're joking. How many times have we done this on the damage report, on the Young Turks? How many mass shootings? And how many more will we? We will have the same conversation. Maybe someday we'll have it with Amanda again on the show. We'll be blessed enough to talk about a mass shooting in Denver, Tallahassee, Sacramento. I don't know. Maybe it'll be in a city you're in right now. And to that point, let's talk about the last one actually. Let's go through all of the shooting stuff in one go. We are less than a week out from the string of shootings that killed a bunch of people in and around Atlanta, predominantly women of Asian descent. And we have Amanda Nguyen on the show. And Amanda, when you were on the show just a couple of weeks ago, it was to talk about this string of harassment and violence against this community. And then, what do you know? It reaches what I can only hope is the peak, the worst instance. But we haven't had a chance to talk about that in general terms. So I imagine the last week has been pretty rough.
Yeah, it feels like a betrayal. It's validation in the worst possible way, because for the past several months, I've been essentially bearing my soul out to this country saying, how many more lives is it gonna take in order for people to take our stories seriously? How many people need to be killed? It's going to happen. I'm telling you what the consequence is if we don't do something about this. And then it happened, right? And so, I heard about the shooting while I was on a live interview, and it was so heartbreaking. The reporter was like, sorry, we have breaking news. We're hearing now that there has been a mass shooting targeting Asian women. There have been 2 confirmed dead, no 4, no 6, no 8. And the reporter then asked me, in light of these shootings, do you think there still is progress? First of all, that was a very tough question in that moment. And second, I mean, like, what other answer can I give than yes, we have to talk about this. Activism can't stop on this. So look, people are grieving right now. I literally couldn't sleep that night. I just literally like walked around DC, and a bunch of people started reaching out. So I'm really glad. Thank you to the people who reached out. If you have Asian friends and you're trying to be a good ally, you can do that. Literally just like, I know a lot of people, don't know how to be a good ally. So simply saying, hey, I'm here for you. How can I be there for you? Or like, hey, I can't begin to understand what you're going through, but what can I do to make your day better? Stuff like that, it matters. So, now is a better time than ever to reach out. But yeah, I mean, we're literally picking up pieces of our soul and marching forward.
Yeah.
It sucked.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess a version of insult to injury is like the headlines of that shooting are on the front page of sites that then are like, oh, and here's 5 more attacks that have happened. Here's, a 79-year-old woman being attacked on the street the morning after. Here's, for instance, here's a screenshot for you. Man arrested in attack on Asian American woman at rally with daughter in New York City. Just to be clear, the rally she was at was against this sort of violence. So people are going to these rallies to stand against the violence and are being attacked in the exact same way. Yeah. That's Katie Hu, a 37-year-old Asian American woman. She was with her 7-year-old daughter. But neither the irony of the situation or the presence of a 7-year-old was able to stop this individual from attacking her. And by the way, in a separate attack that took place just a few hours later, a 54-year-old woman was walking home when someone approached from behind using a metal pipe to hit her in the face. Witnesses said they heard the suspect say, "I'm here to F up Asians." So I can't wait to hear Tucker Carlson talk about how let's not jump to conclusions about the motives. It's gonna take more than a person telling you exactly what they're trying to do before we can be sure. And so it's like this terrible shooting. And that is the absolute high point of violence in a landscape that it has not relented.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I talked about this last time, but it's literally people being lit on fire, burned alive, having acid thrown on them. A 2-year-old and a 6-year-old stabbed in a supermarket in Texas. I mean, it's literally walking down the street, people getting murdered. Vicha, that's what happened to him. So there is this palpable fear that already existed before the mass shooting, and now there's this eruption because it's just so horrific. But we have been living this horror, and it is well past time for people to take it seriously. It's starting to change, so I am glad, but momentum is really hard to capture. And if we don't, have a very clear call to action, organize and push it, then I am standing up at night worried about where my community is going as a movement and how we are going to be able to keep this call up, so that our community is safe.
Yeah. You talked about the possibility of progress. Let's turn to one possible area of that. So look, the violence and harassment against the Asian American and Pacific Islander community is not new. It didn't start with the attacks in Atlanta. It's not gonna end with the attacks in Atlanta. But over the past month, there's at least been a little bit of news coverage of the fact that this exists, so this is going on, which seems like a prerequisite to do something about it. And obviously there has been a lot more talk in the wake of the attacks in Atlanta last week. But has it been the most productive talk? Because Media Matters noted an interesting trend to the conversation over the past weekend. There have been panels about this, which is something, but the panels have often looked like this on Meet the Press, where you have a bunch of people, but none of them are part of the community. And then you even have sort of the acknowledgement of that problem by Chuck Todd saying, the Asian American community has been talking about this for a year, basically, since the start of the pandemic. And it really took the rest of sort of collective political intelligentsia to take notice, sadly, after the tragedy of this week. So he's sort of talking about the fact that they've woken up, but not realizing that maybe not as much as you might have thought. And look, the thing is, we will occasionally get criticized for instance, if there's like a big piece of legislation targeting the LGBTQ community that comes out and we have a show that day, why didn't we have a guest from that community? And it's a perfectly fine criticism. I will say it's a very difficult day of for our very limited booking department to do that. For the Sunday Meet the Press, you got a lot of resources. I think you could probably find somebody from the community. And we have, I think, a worse version of this in just a second, but I wanted to give Amanda a chance. What did you think about this? Are we being unfair? Have you noticed more representation in the media coverage of this than I'm giving credit for?
No, you're not being unfair. It should go to say, if you're talking about hate crimes against the Asian community, and if the problem is invisibility, don't perpetuate that problem by literally not making us visible amongst the experts that you have on to talk about it. I'm only laughing because otherwise I would be enraged. I mean,
yeah,
this is what I'm talking about gaslighting earlier. Like, you say you want to help, but what are you doing? You know, it's not a lack of commentators or academics or activists or influencers. We're out here. We've been saying, please include our voices. You know, who made that decision, right? Like who said, yeah, like green light this is okay. Because somewhere among them, they must have seen the irony in this. And the only way I could think about it is that there aren't enough critical voices that are holding, checks to the decision makers within Meet the Press, within these outlets, because just the regular person looking at this would be able to point out what's wrong with the picture.
Yeah. Well, we've got another picture, actually in quick succession. This is a video. We've got Chris Wallace. So this is regrettably Fox News talking, not just about the shooting, but about one specific part of this, which we're going to transition to as well, which is the way that prominent Republicans and members of right-wing media have talked about the pandemic. And so here is Chris Wallace asking if that might have been a contributing factor to last week's shooting.
Guy, you saw that clip of Vice President Harris at the top of the segment, and I think it was pretty clear she was drawing a link between these attacks and President Trump, and especially his talk about the China virus and Kung flu. Do you think that's fair?
I don't.
Oh, he talked more, but I'm not going to listen to it. Why is he the person that's commenting on that? And is anyone surprised that he thinks that's an unfair thing to say? Yeah, just multiple panels from companies that have massive resources that could bring anyone they want. You know who they could bring? They could bring Amanda on. Actually, Amanda would come and she would talk with a combination of authority and passion about the topic. It would be really easy. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you've experienced any of the Fox specific coverage of this. I don't know if that's something, Amanda, that you wanted to open yourself up to, considering how rough the last week must have been.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have some self-preservation in me. So I did not engage in that. But look, anyone who wants to just see what the connection is between our leaders' words and the violence that has happened need only to not only look at the data, the rise in it, the facts, the figures, but also ask the perpetrators. Some of them will willingly admit to you that they did it because President Trump said so, right? Like the guy who stabbed the 2-year-old and 6-year-old, he fully admitted to that. So yes, there is a direct link, and also we are saying it. And please listen to us and include us within your panels. It's really simple. Representation matters.
Exactly. And I wanted to finally ask you about after the shooting happened, you had that press conference with the cop, and he talked about how the dude was having a bad day, and it's it's not racism, it's the sex addiction. That's what the killer told me, and I trust everything he says. And then the media started talking about it, and lots of right-wing media seemed to only get fired up about one thing. How dare you leap to the conclusion that race had anything to do with this guy driving past tons of other places specifically to kill Asian American women. And so I'm curious, like that being so much of the conversation, are you at all worried about how that might have influenced coming out of this shooting, whether they're more or less likely to happen in the future, that there seems to be so much media infrastructure designed to shield racists from what they do being recognized as such?
There are a couple things I want to address here. One is when the news was reporting on it, the first thing that I thought about beyond, that question that I had to answer the reporter is at least they're talking about it, which is like so sad because we're just like fighting for scraps. We're fighting to exist. Like, thank you for covering the story of our pain. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as somebody who has lived as a woman and Asian my entire life, I can tell you that there's absolutely no question that this was racially motivated. He said that he had a sex addiction. Asian women have had to deal with yellow fever for a really long time. Yellow fever is this idea where you objectify the Asian female body. And when you literally look at a human like an object, then your chances for being violent to that human skyrockets when you dehumanize us. So the intersection of misogyny and racism is at full display here. And how the police reacted to that is also a display of a complete lack of understanding of what it means to live in this body, to be yellow, to be a woman. It was so fascinating to see those T-shirts that were exposed by folks, that police officer. For folks who don't know, I think it was the police officer who spoke at the press conference,
yes,
who had these T-shirts that said China virus on them. I mean, what an end-to-end full service spectrum of how a president can say something that's racist, and then that is then okayed by the state that is trying to protect us, whose mission is protect us. So when we see our leaders talk about this, and when we see people who are supposed to protect us talk about this, where do we go? There have been plenty of people who have had bad days, and they don't go killing people. It is unacceptable. So I think we should revisit some things there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, we're gonna touch base with the audience. We have a little bit more on this that we're gonna return to in just a moment. But first of all, I wanted to see what's going on out there. I saw a comment from Jocelyn on YouTube who said, "Hi John, I'm a little low on nuggets right now, but I'm wondering if you got my chat about 16-year-olds voting. I feel that if you're old enough to be sent to prison, you're old enough to vote." Yes, so apparently my video has frozen a bit. Thankfully, it happened outside of the video, I think. Okay, well, apparently you can still hear me. I think it happened once last week. Well, if you can hear me, I'm gonna continue reading because you don't need to see me for this. But let's see. Jack Flannery with a very serious question, asking urgent question: do you always toast your Pop-Tarts? Amanda, what's your position on Pop-Tart preparation?
Oh, I love a toasted Pop-Tart. I think it's so good. What's your favorite flavor?
Oh, brown sugar cinnamon. What about you?
That is the correct answer. There is no other answer than that. So yeah, ding, ding, ding. If you were on an island and you only could eat Pop-Tarts, what are the 3 flavors that you would have?
Oh geez, well obviously it would be brown sugar cinnamon. I would probably want to mix it up with a fruit, so I'd probably go with cherry, I think. And maybe something chocolate. I'll say the s'mores. What do you say?
Oh yeah, those s'mores were really good. They are very, very good. Man, I haven't had a Pop-Tart in a long time. No, I want them.
That is not true for me. I'll just say. Now let's see. We have a poem from Franklin Sharpslicer who says, Tucker, don't tell me what I lack. Don't bother quoting facts. I just know, I'm authority, so I should know. Yakety yak, I am the fact. Amanda, welcome to the Dragon Squad. Thank you, Franklin. Dragon Squad is what the audience refers to themselves as. Seem happy to see you. Yes, we are going to need to take a quick break to fix this in a second. But before we do that, Jasmine Kelly says, hi, hey John, big fan of the show. It's my mom's 50th birthday today, and a shout out from you would make her day. I hope my British money will be enough for a shout out, and thank you, John, for everything you do. Her name is Rita. Jasmine, thank you so much. And Rita, happy birthday. I hope it's a good one, considering
happy
everything
birthday,
that's going on.
Rita.
Thank you for that. Mika, welcome to Tier 1 YouTube membership. Thank you for that. Okay. Pilakoa says, hashtag Asian strong. You guys rock. Mahalo for your work. Thank you so much for that. Do appreciate that. Okay, Rathnar Slayer says, Dragon of the North Wind. So glad I live in Hawaii where we have extreme gun control, and Asian and Pacific Islanders are almost the entire population. So none of this stupid supremacy bull. Yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing. If someone in Hawaii wanted to commit a mass shooting, they'll just find the guns. It doesn't matter if they're not available or indeed even illegal. They'll just find them. It's spontaneous creation. Anyway, we're gonna see if we can get this video thing fixed. So hopefully we'll be back in just a second. Okay, that was fun. So, interestingly, we've done like a year of lockdown shots, mostly at home. And then here, I don't think we once had an issue where I had to dump out the actual call. But Amanda, thank you for bearing with us.
I was getting some Pop-Tarts.
Nice. You want to know? Here's what was actually apparently happening, and this is just about the most horrifying thing that can happen with an expensive camera. So I turned off the camera and turned it back on. I checked the cable or whatever. The preview on the image on the camera remained when the camera was off. Don't know how that happens. Had to actually unplug it from the wall. That's horrifying, and the camera's probably broken. But we're gonna go with it as long as we can. With that, why don't we jump back into the news? Many people noticed that in the wake of a lot of outpouring of support for Asian Americans after the violence in Atlanta, lots of people were trying to show their support. One of them was Meghan McCain, and it was pointed out that it was a little bit hypocritical considering some of her past statements in this area. We talked about it last week, but I'll allow John Oliver to sum up the issue.
Just last year, many were loudly warning that Trump calling COVID names like the China virus was likely to lead to a rise in violence against people of Asian descent, an argument that at the time, not everyone seemed to find convincing.
I think if the left wants to focus on PC labeling this virus, it is a great way to get Trump reelected. I don't have a problem with people calling it whatever they want. It's a deadly virus that did originate in Wuhan. I don't have a problem with it.
Oh, good. Meghan McCain doesn't have a problem with it. Listen not to the scores of Asian Americans telling everyone that the term is dangerous and offensive. Instead, gather around and take the word of a wealthy white woman who's dressed like she's about to lay off 47 people over Zoom. Now, I will say, McCain posted this week, "Stop Asian hate" with 3 broken heart emojis, which is a fine sentiment to throw up on Twitter after the fact. But there has to be an understanding that saying, "I don't have a problem with calling it the China virus" is very much giving space for that hate to grow.
Yes, so a lot of people pointed out this issue. She has eventually responded to it with a tweet saying, "I condemn the reprehensible violence and vitriol that has been targeted towards the Asian American community. There is no doubt Donald Trump's racist rhetoric fueled many of these attacks, and I apologize for any past comments that aided that agenda." So progress, right? Amanda, what do you think?
All I can say is listen to the community. Listen to the community. I get it. It's really, really hard to understand in a nuanced way when you have lived with privilege your entire life. And that's not to discount what actual privileged people have to go through, because everyone has their own thing. But what I'm saying is we get into this a lot with legislating, right? That like people in power who have the ability to write these laws, many of them are very well intentioned. It's not like when they write these laws, they're like malicious. However, if you don't have people at the drafting table with you who have these lived experiences, then you're gonna miss on some things. And more importantly, when people from these communities say, "Hey, that's gonna result in violence. Hey, we are afraid for our lives, for our family members' lives," listen to it. I'm glad that she's apologized. At least there's that. But moving forward, I think she is an example of someone who didn't listen. So
yeah, it's such a good point. Like, imagine what if I'm trying to think of like an example, like I don't know, Chuck Schumer started throwing around some term about the trans community or something. And imagine if we covered it on the show and I was like, you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm good with it. But okay.
Yeah.
Who am I? Who am I? Like, and for McCain, it's marginally worse because, look, there's lots of different forms of privilege. The fact that she's a daughter of a senator and wealthy beyond any morals comprehension, that is another form. I'm a man, that's a different form. But like, it's not your call.
Yeah.
How could you not know? And look, it's the same sort of job. We opine about politics. You say a lot of things that you don't necessarily know 100% about, but you should recognize when you know 0% about it and that it has nothing to do with you. It's such a weird thing, Amanda.
Oh yeah, it's weird. And it also has enabled violence. So, I look at that and it's been our lived experience for so long. And I'm glad that this conversation is happening because people can learn from it. It's empathy. That's the core of this is learning what you do know and also learning your boundaries of where your knowledge ends, right? And when you have that and you can say, hey, you know what, I don't know. I from my lived experience, I don't understand, but I hear you. That's one way to learn, and not just say like, let me just dismiss millions of people who are calling this out, even though like I haven't ever lived in your skin before. Let me just dismiss it. That's not the right call.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. And there's a case could be made that her in advance, well, not in advance of all of the harassment and violence, it was almost immediate, but in advance of some of the worst violence is bad. Saying it wasn't racist after the violence, though, seems even worse. And while Fox spent days after the Atlanta shooting arguing that it's a travesty that people would imply that white supremacy has anything to do with this or racism has anything to do with this, I worry that they are going to double and triple down on this. They are looking for things they can activate their audience to hate. They found a few. They keep talking about women's sports as a way to activate their audience to hate the trans community. I don't know that they necessarily thought a year ago that trying to get people to hate Asian Americans would be their thing, but they want people mad about the pandemic. And they found a scapegoat that clearly a lot of racists find to be very appealing. So God only knows where they're going to turn to on this topic in the future, when and if almost certainly more violence continues to happen.
Yeah, and they're gonna get a lot of help from the structural things at play that have made us a scapegoat for literally the entire existence of when Asian Americans have stepped onto this country. That's a very old playbook that they're stepping into.
100%. Okay, let's switch things up and talk about something very different for a bit. You remember Sidney Powell? I unfortunately do. She became very famous in the months after the election because she was one of the most out in front proponents of the big lie that the election was stolen by insert a noun, everything, Venezuela, aliens, I don't know, a Kraken is gonna be released and the Kraken is stuffing ballots. And at the time, she knew, as many who were pushing this lie, that making very specific defamatory claims about individual companies involved in the election could open her up to legal liability. And in fact, it has, because the election infrastructure company Dominion Voting Systems sued Sidney Powell, among other people, for defamation after she pushed lawsuits and made appearances in conservative media on behalf of then President Donald Trump to sow doubt about the 2020 election results. Dominion claims that Powell knew her election fraud accusations were false and hurtful to the company, both of which would be necessary for a defamation claim like this to actually work. Well, she has a defense against this now. She said that the lawsuit should be dismissed, arguing that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her accusations of Dominion being part of an election rigging scheme with ties to Venezuela, quote, were truly statements of fact, which is amazing. And you kind of want to pause on that, but we're going to proceed. Given the highly charged and political context of the statements, it's clear that Powell was describing the facts on which she based the lawsuit she filed in support of President Trump. That is what her defense lawyer said. And they go on to say, indeed, plaintiffs themselves characterize the statements at issue as wild accusations and outlandish claims. They're repeatedly labeled inherently improbable and even impossible. Such characterizations of the allegedly defamatory statements further support defendants' position that reasonable people would not accept such statements as fact, but view them only as claims that await testing by the courts through the adversary process. So Amanda, she is all of a sudden being very, what, me? No, those were just the things that the people I was representing were saying. I just had to put it out there for the courts to look into. I'm not saying anything as if it's true or factual, which, look, I don't know how much attention you paid on a nightly basis to her and others' appearances following the election, but that is not how it was presented at the time, I vaguely recall.
Yeah, can I have that excuse too for like literally everything else in my life? What? Yeah. I think we're living in a satire. What else is this? It's so ludicrous to me that you can, hold up an apple and say, this is an orange. Like we have eyeballs. If anyone has eyeballs and can hear and has seen what she has said, then they would know that she's out of her mind.
I would argue the same thing, or at the least, she recognized a good grift when she saw one and wanted to have her grift and not be sued for it too. It is occasionally nice to realize that though, I may disagree on a lot of stuff with people like Sidney Powell and others, that at the end of the day, we do have some things in common. Like I might say, how could anyone believe this garbage? It turns out she's saying the same thing. She also doesn't understand why anyone would trust her. But as important as I think this is, considering how influential she got, how many Republicans now believe that everything she said is 100% true and they will base their future political activity on those beliefs. She is not the first to come up with this defense, as many longtime viewers of the show are probably way ahead of us on. Tucker Carlson once used this, or I should say Fox's lawyers defended Tucker Carlson this way. You literally can't believe the facts that he tells you. That's what they were saying. And the judge actually bought it in that case, saying Fox persuasively argues that given Mr. Carlson's reputation, any reasonable viewer arrives with an appropriate amount of skepticism about the statements that he makes. But even Tucker Carlson was not the first. Alex Jones, his attorneys also argued that no reasonable person would believe what he says. And in fact, he's just playing a character that's saying things. It's not true. So like you said, Amanda, it is very convenient to be able to just say whatever you want. And if anything you say is demonstrably defamatory or dangerous, you can just say, why would anyone be dumb enough to actually believe that any of this garbage is true?
They're not on Comedy Central like the Colbert Report, so what does that say about their what are they saying about the people who watch them? In making this argument, what they have admitted to is, our audience is really gullible, and that's on them if they think that what we're saying is real. And it should come with like disclaimers all around, like this is entertainment. We are not telling the truth, right? I just,
yep.
I disagree, and I have feelings about people lying to other people.
If there was like a watermark on the screen, don't trust this man, I would have less of a problem with it. But the thing, I get telling them lies. It gets you an audience, it gets you paid, it gets you influence. Sidney Powell got 1 billion Twitter followers like instantly. So I get why you would do it, and I get why you would use this defense. It worked for Tucker Carlson. Maybe it'll work for her too. What I don't get though is why them doing it doesn't appear to hurt them with their audience. Like, let's say hypothetically, I were to lie a ton, like a lie to the audience, and I were to someday go to court and be like, Man, Dragon Squad, how stupid do they have to be to actually believe this garbage? This is an actual question to the audience. Please comment. Would you have a problem with me doing that? Because I hope that you would. Tucker Carlson's audience doesn't seem to care. Alex Jones's audience loves him as much as they did before all of this stuff. Sidney Powell probably still has 1 million Twitter followers. So would this bother you? I really hope that you have enough self-respect to be bothered by that. Anyway.
It's people's identity, It's like you're in the hole deep enough at that point, you're just gonna go with it.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah, oh God. Anyway, okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We have one more story we're gonna turn to in just a minute. I'm going to attempt to read some super chats. I really hope that that is not somehow metaphysically freezing my camera, but we're gonna see what we can do. Damon sent in a comment saying, I'm an hour from Boulder and tired of mass shootings, but oh wait, this is normal. Also, I got laid off 30 days ago and today's the first day I caught a live show since whoop. Damon, really sorry, obviously, for what's going on near where you live and that situation. Pandemic's been incredibly rough. So hope that we can lighten your day just a little bit. Chub Toad sent you a super chat saying that they believe they've identified the gunman. I don't want to say anything definitive about any of the identity stuff until I've had time to do research, but thank you as always for letting us know about breaking news. I do appreciate that for the audience. Jessica says it was an AR-15 and Biden is calling for an assault weapon ban. Again, I don't want to say anything definitive. I would say even if this person didn't have one, they should still definitely be banned, but I don't know for sure about this particular event. Okay, Keystone Survival and Free Grouping Dragon, thank you for becoming tier 1 members on YouTube. I do appreciate that. It gives you access to emojis and all of that, so please enjoy. Robert says, made it at the end for a super chat. Gang, Dragon Wagon, let's do this squad. Happy Tuesday. Robert, thank you for joining us. Okay. Obi-Wan Kenobi over on Twitch gifted some tier 1 subs. Thank you for that. And thank you to Kelly June, Better with Progressives as well. Really appreciate that. And with that, Amanda, why don't we move into our last topic for the show? A new paper has delved into one particular set of ways that those at the the highest end of the income scale avoid paying a good deal of taxes. Now, we're familiar with other methods having to do with tax loopholes, sending your money offshore, things like that. But I want to delve into what they found recently here. The paper estimates that the top 1% of households fail to report in total about 21% of their income on average, with 6 percentage points of that due to sophisticated strategies that random audits don't detect. So moving forward, when thinking about possible ways to fix that, understand that the current system, even insofar as some rich individuals are occasionally audited and far fewer are than were just a few years ago, let alone a few decades ago, many of these techniques can actually survive an audit. For the top 0.1%, unreported income may be nearly twice as large as conventional IRS methodologies would suggest. And the London School of Economics, which produced this, says that these strategies include offshore tax avoidance, which may have waned after stricter reporting requirements took effect about a decade ago. But many high-income Americans also use partnerships and similar entities to avoid taxes, and such behavior may be increasing and becoming harder for tax authorities to find and unentangle. And so, Amanda, on the show recently, we've been talking about Congressman Ro Khanna. He has a plan to inject a bunch more money into the IRS to try to get the rates of audits of wealthy individuals and corporations back up near where they used to be. What's interesting about this study is that they show that it's not, and they say in particular, it's not just a body count of how many people we have. You need specialized agents that are as good at tracking down this tax avoidance as the highly skilled accountants hired to do the tax avoidance actually are, which seems like moving forward, obviously money's gonna be required, but it seems like the IRS has a big task in front of them if they're going to try to adapt to the way the rich have been avoiding taxes recently.
Yeah, look, I will be the first to admit that I don't know enough in order to have an informed opinion about this, but what I do know is, what do you need all that money for after you die? You're like all these people who are avoiding this, you have more than enough to do everything it is that you want and more in your lifetime and your kids after and your grandchildren. So like what is that other than like seeing a number in your bank account go up? I feel like these people could buy a Lamborghini every day and just drive it into the lake every day. They'd be fine. Like, it wouldn't even, they wouldn't even know it's missing. So
totally. Yeah, the only thing I would add, devil's advocate, I think it's partly seeing the number going up in your bank account. I think more so for some of them, it's seeing the public numbers go up in their ranking amongst rich people and stuff like that, or the value of their corporations, stuff like that. Like, I think it's like, in some ways people want to compete with like how nice their house looks. They compete with the people on their street. Some people, their street is the country or the world, and they want to rank really well. It no longer has any relationship to their life. Like, for you and I, gaining or losing money matters. It affects how we live, what sort of possibilities we have. For these people, they could carve their face on the moon. At that point, it's not really about what you can do with your money, I guess. But anyway, yeah. And let me be the second to admit that I'm not an expert on this. I'll defer to the experts. That's why we bring on people like Rokana to talk about this, actually. But something definitely needs to be done. They've become very skilled at this. It makes it seem to me like, maybe an analogy is, corporations that want to harden their systems against hacking often will hire hackers or former hackers to do it for them. I feel like maybe that's something IRS could look into. Although, as already noted, not an expert.
Yeah, that'd be a good movie too. Yeah. Maybe less
not as exciting as the hackers,
or maybe more, depending on what they find.
Maybe there was that movie, The Accountant, and that got pretty exciting. I didn't know that accountants did that much shooting of guns. But anyway, Amanda, we have regrettably reached the end of our show. I've been watching the chat during it, and there's been a lot of great reaction to your appearance. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your what must be an incredibly busy day and joining us. If people would like to follow your work, where can they do that?
Well, thank you for having me on, and thanks y'all for inviting me into this community. You can volunteer at risenow.us. You can donate if you want at risenow.us/donate, and you can follow me on Instagram at Amanda NGOCNGUYEN, my full name.
Awesome, Amanda. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Okay, so before we close things out, just gonna try to read a few more of these. Normally, we're able to get to more of your comments. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't know what that was about. There is speculation about ghosts. And I have, if you were watching the pre-show, I mentioned I heard some stuff a couple days ago here at the studio, and I don't know what's going on. I was the only human in this building, but something was walking around. Anyway, okay, Stephanie says, well, I guess you spoke too soon, John. We just had a shooting at a gas station down the street from me here in Tallahassee. 2 people were reported shot. So Tallahassee was one of the random city names I pulled out. Sorry about that, Stephanie, obviously. As we said at the beginning of the show, the national media will focus on a few mass shootings every once in a while. Generally, if it's in a city that hasn't had a big one recently, if it's in a specific location that hasn't been targeted. Other than that, once it starts to repeat itself, generally the media doesn't pay nearly as much attention. Mark Davis says, I recently reported a salaried member of management for an anti-Asian email sent out. A few days later, I randomly received a $5 an hour pay cut. That is definitely something you should bring to HR. That is crazy, especially if it is that quick a turnaround on that. Wow. Sidney says, I work in taxes and I watch the IRS audit those who make very little and ignore those with more money. It's so frustrating. Yeah. Feral says, can I be Feral Dragon? You can, that's the only natural name for you, clearly. And Derek says, we should just introduce video game achievements for donating their money. Let them compete over that. One person donates a big sum and calls Elon out and we're off. I mean, look, the rich do that. Generally, that's why, and there's some rich people who do a fabulous amount of charity, and that is great. And usually will get a great amount of press as a result of it. It just generally is far less of a threat to their overall financial standing than something not within their control, such as a wealth tax would be, which is maybe why they choose to go down the widely publicized charity route. Anyway, okay, well, with that, thank you everybody for joining us for this show. We've got big plans for the week, and that starts tomorrow, or continues tomorrow with Jared Jackson, who joins us for Wednesdays, which are big news days here in America for whatever reason. Anyway, thank you for joining us. And until next time, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and we'll see you soon.